A man stands alone in the middle of the ice. His lips are cracked open, his beard is frozen solid, the soles of his feet are peeling away, inside his own boots. His skin is falling off him in strips, like plaster crumbling off an old wall. He is hundreds of miles from another human being, from any warmth, from any help. Two men were with him, one vanished into a crevasse. In less than a second, the other died in front of him, inside their tent. And now this man is walking. Why? Because stopping means dying. This is the true story of Douglas Mawson, and every word of it is real. In 1913, in a stretch of Antarctica known as the windiest place on Earth, this man was walking back alone, saving his life, while his body was falling apart around him. If you thought there was a limit to what a human body could endure, wait, because what happened to Mawson still unsettles doctors today. This isn't just a survival story. This is the story of a man who cut his own sledge in half, cut away pieces of his own skin, and once hung from a rope over a crevasse thinking this might be exactly where his story ends. But he didn't stop. Let's go back to the beginning. In 1911, while the world was consumed by the race to the South Pole, Amundsen and Scott chasing the flag, an Australian geologist named Douglas Mawson had a different goal entirely. He didn't want a flag, he wanted the part of East Antarctica no one had ever mapped, its rock, its geology, its magnetic fields. He organized the Australasian Antarctic Expedition, base camp, Cape Denison, in Commonwealth Bay, a place that would later be called the windiest place on Earth. From there, small teams fanned out in different directions. Mawson led one of them himself, the Far Eastern Sledging Party. 3 men, Douglas Mawson, 30, leader and geologist, Belgrave Ninnis, 25, British Army officer, in charge of the dogs, Xavier Mertz, 28, Swiss ski champion. On November 10, 1912, they left base, 2 sledges, 16 huskies, and food for 5 to 6 weeks. They pushed inland, onto the polar plateau, the massive ice sheet covering East Antarctica. For weeks, everything went to plan. They laid supply depots, mapped new terrain, collected rock samples. Then, on December 14, 1912, everything changed in an instant. The 3 men were roped together in a line, Mawson in front on skis, probing the snow with his pole, 1 sledge behind him, Ninnis at the back, driving the second sledge, with the 6 strongest dogs, and most of their remaining food. Mawson and Mertz crossed a stretch of snow that looked completely solid. Then they heard it, a sharp crack, behind them. They turned around. Ninnis, his sledge, and 6 dogs, gone. Just a hole in the snow where they had been. They crawled to the edge and looked down. Far below, on a ledge, 1 injured dog. Deeper still, in the dark blue below that, the smashed wreckage of a sledge. There was no sign of Ninnis. They shouted his name, again and again. Only the ice answered, with silence. That single accident had taken Ninnis, 6 dogs, their tent, most of their human food, most of the dog food, and critical spare gear. In one moment, an ambitious scientific expedition became a fight to stay alive. What remained? 1 sledge, 7 dogs, roughly 10 days of rations, 1 small emergency tent, and a single stove. They were nearly 500 kilometers from base. There was only one choice left, turn around. But the real question wasn't which direction to go, it was whether they could survive long enough to get there. Food was running out fast. Mawson and Mertz had to make a decision no one wants to make. They began killing their weakest or injured dogs, one by one. Some of the meat, they ate themselves, the rest went to the remaining dogs, to keep them strong enough to pull the sledge. They saved the liver especially, it seemed like the richest source of nutrients they had. What they didn't know was that this choice, meant to keep them alive, was quietly poisoning them. Dog liver contains extremely high levels of vitamin A, in small amounts. It's nourishing, eaten heavily, day after day, it becomes toxic, a condition called hypervitaminosis. Strange changes began appearing in both men: itching, peeling skin, nausea, hair falling out, aching joints. Mertz was hit harder, maybe because he ate more liver, or his body simply couldn't tolerate it as well. He began breaking down fast. Mawson suspected the liver was the problem and tried to limit how much Mertz ate, but the damage had already been done. Mertz's symptoms worsened: severe diarrhea, extreme weakness, confusion, and his skin, on his legs and hips, began peeling away. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he spoke of home, other times he simply told Mawson, "Go on without me." On or around January 8, 1913, Xavier Mertz died. Mawson wrapped Mertz's body in his sleeping bag and moved it outside the tent, marking the spot with a simple cross made of skis. Then he crawled back inside. He was alone now, 160 kilometers from base, one sledge, a few days of food, and a body that had already begun to fail him. He had two choices: lie down and let it end, or get up. He chose to get up. Mawson sawed his sledge in half to make it lighter. He kept only the essentials: a small tent, sleeping bag, stove, a little food, and, remarkably, a few of his rock samples. Even facing death, the scientist in him refused to let them go. Then he started walking. Scurvy had set in, a lack of vitamin C, aching joints, bleeding gums, exhaustion. In his diary, he wrote that the skin of his heels came off in one piece, like a slipper. He would cut away the loose, dead skin with his own hands, wrap the raw flesh in cloth, force his boots back on, and keep walking. Skin came away from his legs and hips in patches the size of his palm. His hair fell out, his fingernails loosened. There was no doctor, no help, just him, a compass, and the ice ahead. One day, ground that looked completely solid gave way beneath him without warning. Mawson and his sledge began falling into a crevasse. The rope connecting him to the sledge snapped taut. By sheer luck, the shortened sledge caught on the lip of the crevasse, and Mawson was left hanging in the darkness below, suspended by the harness rope. Below him, there was nothing but depth. He tried climbing the rope. His raw, shaking hands slipped. He fell back down. He tried again. This time, he thought of Mertz, of Ninnis, of his fiancée back home, and the thought crossed his mind that this might be where it all ended. On the third attempt, he hooked an elbow, then his chest, over the edge, and crawled, inch by inch, back onto solid ground. Then he did something that says everything about his mindset. He shortened the rope, so that if he fell again, he wouldn't fall as far. And he kept walking. Back in November, on the outbound leg, the Far Eastern party had buried a supply cache in the snow, a hideout they'd nicknamed Aladdin's Cave. If Mawson could reach it, he'd have real food, some rest, and only a short distance left to base. After roughly a month alone on the ice, he finally spotted the original in the marker can he was searching for. He dug through the packed snow and broke into the cache. Inside, biscuits, chocolate, jam, and kerosene. He lit the stove properly for the first time in weeks, ate a real meal, rested. It seemed like the worst was finally over. It wasn't. A blizzard rolled in and trapped him there for nearly a week. He was only 8 to 10 kilometers from Cape Denison, and he couldn't move. The storm finally passed. Mawson packed up and pushed for the final stretch. On February 8, 1913, dragging his half-sledge, barely able to stand, he made it to Cape Denison. What he saw broke him. The Aurora, the expedition's ship, was gone. It had left that very morning, after waiting weeks in brutal weather for the Far Eastern party to return. He had missed it by mere hours. If the blizzard hadn't trapped him in Aladdin's cave, he might have reached the ship in time. He reached the hut. Most of the gear had already been packed away. Most of the men had already sailed. Only 6 people remained, left behind on Mawson's own earlier orders, in case a sledging party came back late. They stared at him like they were seeing a ghost, because they had already assumed the Far Eastern party was dead. And now, standing in the doorway, gaunt, hollow-eyed, hands torn apart, was their leader. He was alive. But there was no going home that year. The Aurora wouldn't return until the following season. Mawson and the 6 who stayed behind had to spend a full extra year at Cape Denison. But he was alive. Douglas Mawson didn't conquer Antarctica. No one does. He survived it, barely, and brought back a story written not in heroics, but in frost-bitten blisters, a sledge cut in half, and a shortened rope dragged across wind-carved snow. It's a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys don't happen on the way up, they happen on the way back, when everything has already gone wrong, and you keep going anyway. If this true story moved you, like the video, and subscribe, because there are many more true stories of endurance coming, from glaciers to deserts, from oceans to mountains.